We were sitting by the fire that night, the kind of quiet glowing evening where the world outside felt like it didn't exist. Just the crackle of burning wood, the smell of pine smoke, and the warmth wrapping around us like a heavy blanket. I thought it would be like any other night, just me and Ethan, my grandson, enjoying the comfort of family. But then out of nowhere he leaned a little closer, looked at me in a way that made my heart slow, and told me something I never expected to hear. What he shared that night. Well, I still replay it in my mind, wondering how such a simple evening could change so much. Before I tell you exactly what happened, I want to know, from which cities are you watching us right now? I love hearing where everyone's from, so type your city in the comments. Alright, now let me take you back to that night. The fire was the only light in the room, casting a soft orange glow that danced across the old photographs on my mantle. Ethan had been visiting for a few days. It had been too long since we'd had real uninterrupted time together. Life as it does had kept him busy, and though I understood, I had missed him deeply. He was 30 now, a grown man with a life of his own. But in my eyes I could still see the boy who used to run barefoot through my backyard, his laughter carrying through the summer air. He was sitting in the armchair across from me, his legs stretched out, one hand resting loosely over the armrest while the other cradled a mug of tea. I watched him for a moment without speaking. There was something different about him. Not in how he looked, but in the way he seemed quieter, more thoughtful. He had always been warm and talkative with me, but tonight there was a weight in his eyes, like he'd been carrying something for far too long. "You're awfully quiet tonight," I said, breaking the silence. My voice came out softer than I intended, almost as if I didn't want to disturb the fragile stillness between us. He gave a little shrug, staring into the fire. "Just thinking," he murmured. "About what?" He hesitated, his gaze flicking to mine and then back to the flames. "Everything, life, people, how things change." There was a faint, almost sad smile on his lips, but his eyes told another story. The sound of the fire filled the pause that followed, popping and sighing as the logs shifted. I waited, knowing from experience that Ethan was the kind of person who needed time to gather his words. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth spread through me, and glanced at the clock. It was late, later than we usually stayed up talking. The whole house felt cocooned and quiet, the kind of stillness that makes every word spoken feel heavier, more meaningful. Finally, he set his mug down on the small table beside him. "Grandma," he began, and there was a tremor in his voice I had never heard before. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. I just never knew how." My breath caught just slightly. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe news about his job or a relationship I hadn't heard about. But the way he was looking at me made my heart beat a little faster. There was vulnerability in his eyes, the kind that comes when someone is about to place their trust entirely in your hands. "You can tell me anything," I said gently. "You know that." He nodded but didn't speak right away. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire like the right words might be hiding in its flickering depths. "I've been keeping something from you," he said finally, his voice low. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want you to see me differently." Those words settled deep in my chest. I'd always been close to Ethan, closer than most grandmothers and grandsons I knew. We'd shared secrets before, harmless ones, heartfelt ones. But there was something in the way he said this that told me whatever was coming next would be different. I placed my cup down, my hands folding in my lap. "Ethan," I said quietly, "there's nothing you could tell me that would make me stop caring for you." "Nothing." His eyes met mine then, and I felt it, that unspoken current between us, heavy with emotion. The firelight caught the gold flecks in his irises, making them look almost wet. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then took a deep breath. "I'm not the person you think I am," he said. "At least, not entirely." The words landed in the air between us, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. I could feel the urge to ask 100 questions, but I held them back. Sometimes people just need space to unspool their truth in their own time. I nodded slowly. "Then tell me who you are." He gave a small, almost nervous laugh, but there was no humor in it. "It's not something I can explain in one sentence," he said. "It's about choices I've made and things I've been through that I'd never told you about." The fire cracked loudly then, as if to punctuate his words. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, a soft whisper against the windows. My living room had never felt so intimate, so sealed off from the rest of the world. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes never leaving his. I'm listening. He took another breath, and in that moment I could see him wrestling with himself, with the fear of being judged, with the relief of finally speaking his truth, and with the unknown of how I would react. And though I didn't know yet what his secret was, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever he told me, I was going to hold it close without letting it change the way I saw him, because that's what love is and that's what family is. He stared into the fire a long time, like the flames were spelling out words only he could read. When he finally spoke, it was so soft I almost mistook it for another settling pop from the logs. I quit my job, he said. 3 months ago. My first instinct was to reach for his hand, but I let the space be his. All right, I said, keeping my voice even. Tell me more. He rubbed his thumb along the rim of the mug he wasn't drinking from and took a breath that shook at the edges. I didn't want to say anything until I knew what came next. Only I don't know. I thought if I waited long enough, the answer would show up like a road sign. But the longer I waited, the heavier it caught. I watched his chest rise and fall. The way his shoulders seemed to carry extra weight I hadn't noticed at first. In the firelight, he looked both older and somehow more like the boy who once curled up under a blanket on this same rug, falling asleep to the scratch of the record player. What made you quit? I asked. He swallowed, and there was the smallest flash of shame in his eyes. I couldn't keep pretending I cared about it. I was good at it. At least that's what everyone said. Numbers, targets, the way success looks on paper. Promotions, bonuses. It's a ladder and I was climbing. But halfway up, I realized the ladder was leaned against the wrong wall. The image landed inside me with a quiet, perfect click. So you climbed down, I said. I jumped, he answered with a brief, humorless smile. And I didn't tell anyone because I knew what they'd say. That I'm being impulsive, ungrateful that people would give anything for that kind of stability. And maybe they're right. I know how it sounds. Outside, wind fretted at the eaves, turning the bare oak branches into a whisper against the window. I could hear the clock ticking in the hall, a steady reminder that time keeps moving whether we feel steady or not. What did it feel like? I asked him. The day after you left. He stared at the fire, and I watched the answer move across his face before he found words for it. Like my ears were ringing, he said, like I'd been standing next to a machine for years and someone finally shut it off. The quiet was terrifying. I didn't know what to do with it. I kept checking my phone like I was missing something, some alarm, and when it didn't go off, I realized the alarm had been me. He laughed, then a small broken sound, and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. Without asking, I took the few steps across the rug and sat on the ottoman in front of him. When I set my hand on his knee, he lowered his hands and looked at me like he was waiting for a verdict. You left something that wasn't yours, I said. That doesn't make you a failure. It makes you honest. The relief that crossed his face was quick, shy, like a sunbeam darting out from a cloud and then hiding again. That's not the whole secret. I didn't think it was, I said, and my mouth tugged into a smile. Got one. He looked at the mantel, then the old black and white photos, the framed postcard he sent me from his first solo trip. The little wooden bird he carved in 7th grade. I've been going to the shelter downtown, he said. At first just to help with dinners, but then I stayed later. They've got this little room, half storage, half chaos, full of busted furniture no one knows what to do with. I started fixing things. Chairs with missing rungs, a table whose leg wouldn't stay on, a dresser everyone had given up on. I'd lose track of time. I'd look up and the sun was gone and my phone was dead and my hands were covered in sawdust. And for the first time in years I wasn't counting the minutes until I could leave. Sawdust. I could suddenly smell it, even over the smoke of the fire, clean and sweet, like sunlight made into a scent. You always loved wood, I said, remembering his small fingers pushing a block plane across a 2x4 next to my late husband in the garage, curls of pale shavings blooming at their feet. You loved turning scraps into something that fit. I forgot, he said, voice catching. Or I convinced myself it was just a kid thing. I kept hearing Dad in my head saying, do something stable, son. Find a path with a pension and a plan. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it didn't feel like living. It felt like borrowing someone else's suit and pretending it fit. What is it you want? I asked, though I could already feel the shape of his answer moving toward us like a tide. He sat up straighter, leaned forward until our knees nearly touched, color rising into his cheeks. I want to build, fix, teach. There's a community college that needs a continuing ed instructor for basic carpentry. And the shelter asked if I could run a Saturday class so residents can repair their own things. I've already drafted lesson plans, tools, safety, measuring twice, cutting once, the good stuff. I even found a space I could rent cheap if I'm brave enough. I want to make things that last and help people do the same. But I'm scared, Grandma. I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of what Mom and Dad will say. I'm scared of running out of money and crawling back. He finally said the part I'd been waiting to hear. The fear. It showed me exactly where to lay my words. Do you remember? I said. When you were 12 and we took apart that wobbly kitchen chair. You were stubborn as a mule about it. You wouldn't let me throw it out because you said it had another life in it. He smiled. A real one this time. Took me 2 tries to fit the new rung. 3. I corrected, holding up my fingers. The first tube taught you where to look. The third one taught you how to trust your hands. He let out a breath that sounded like a door easing open. I knew you'd understand, he whispered. I didn't realize how much I needed you to. Is that why you came tonight with your secret? I asked. He shook his head. There's more. He hesitated, then went on. I've been having panic. I guess it started while I was still at work. I'd be at my desk and the room would tilt and my heart would go off like a hammer. I thought there was something wrong with me. I hid in the stairwell until it passed, then went back like nothing happened. Leaving the job helped, but it didn't fix everything. The quiet made it louder sometimes. So I started seeing someone, a counselor. It helps. I didn't tell Mom and Dad because I don't want to be their worry. I didn't tell my friends because they still see me as the steady one. But I wanted to tell you this time I did take his hand. It was warm and restless in mine. A pulse of life I recognized from when he used to fall asleep holding my fingers in the doctor's office waiting room. Age 5 and sick with a stubborn winter cough. I'm proud of you, I said, letting the truth have its full size. Not for quitting, not for starting, for telling the truth to yourself and then to me. That's the hardest work any of us do. He blinked quickly and his mouth pressed into a line that fought not to tremble. You don't think less of me. I think more of you. I said because this I squeezed his hand is how a person gets built with joints that can flex not snap with grain lines you don't try to sand away. We grow in the direction we're meant to when we stop pretending we're plywood. He laughed, then a surprised bark that made the dog in the next yard answer with a single sleepy woof. The fire threw a shower of sparks up the flue, and the house settled like an old cat finding its shape. What do you need from me? I asked. Be specific if you can. His gaze darted to the side toward the hall that led to the garage. The old garage that has held everything from my first car to Christmas ornaments from my husband's workbench. Permission, he said, almost too fast. And a key. You already have the key, I said. And my permission isn't something you need, but you have it anyway. The garage is warmer than it used to be. We could clear the shelves by the window. The light's good there in the mornings. Your grandfather would like the sound of a saw out there again. His eyes softened when I said my husband's name out loud without saying it. Loss has a way of teaching a room to hold its breath. Saying, the name lets the air move again. I was hoping you'd say that, he said. I found his old handplane in the bottom drawer. I cleaned it up last week while you were napping. He grinned, sheepish and boyish all at once. I guess that's another secret. Then consider us secret partners, I said. We spent the next hour sketching possibilities in the air. He told me about the college posting, how the coordinator had sounded surprised to hear a young man talk about teaching basics, like there was honor and mastery before Flash. He described the shelter's residents and how proud they looked when a wobbly table stopped wobbling under their touch. He admitted he had spreadsheets full of numbers that both scared and excited him, budgets and tool lists, and the price difference between pine and poplar. He told me the truth about the nights the panic woke him and what calmed it. Measuring, sanding, the faithful back and forth of turning a rough edge into something the hand wants to return to. When the wood in the fireplace finally collapsed into a glowing bed of coals, I stood and told him to come with me. We padded down the hallway, the familiar unevenness of the floorboards tapping out a rhythm under our feet. The garage smelled like old summers, like oil and the faint metallic whisper of tools. Remembering the last thing they were asked to do. I flipped the light, and we both squinted against the bare bulb's honesty. Here I sat, tugging a dusty tarp off the workbench. It billowed, then fell like a curtain. The bench was scared and beautiful, a map of our family's projects. The crib he made for Ethan's mother, the birdhouses we painted too bright and loved just the same, the miscuts we laughed about and saved to turn into something else. I opened the bottom drawer, and there it was, the hand plane, clean as a new sentence. Ethan picked it up and ran his thumb along the edge, not to test sharpness but to say hello. "I remember this sound," he said, moving the sole across a scrap of wood. The soft shut of it spread through the garage and out into the cold night like a promise. "Tomorrow," I said, "lot corner. We'll make room." He set the plane down and turned to me with a look that took me by surprise, full wet-eyed gratitude that had nothing to do with debt and everything to do with being seen. "I was afraid you'd tell me to go back or to keep it as a hobby or to wait until it made sense." "It already makes sense," I said. "You're breathing like yourself again." We stood there another minute, listening to the house tick and the furnace kick on. A humble music I had come to love more than any concert hall could offer. Then we went back to the living room and settled into our chairs like a story, finding its next page. He reached for his phone and then stopped. "One more thing," he said. "I want to tell Mom and Dad. I don't want to hide. But I'd like you there when I do." "I'll be there," I said. "And if they're fear talks first, we'll let it have its say. Then we'll invite love to speak next." His smile came slowly, like a dawn you can trust. "You always know how to say it." "I don't," I said, "but I know how to wait for the right words." He leaned back, finally finishing his tea, though it had gone cool. The night pressed against the windows, and the fire settled into a steady glow, no longer reaching but resting. I felt the shift inside me too. Not a sudden trumpet of triumph, but the deep, satisfying click of something fitting where it belongs. It was the feeling you get when a drawer slides into its rails without scraping. When a door you've planed finally closes without a fight. Quiet, right? "Tell me about your lesson plan," I said. "Walk me through the first class." He brightened and the room brightened with him as if the fire took the cue. He spoke of measuring tapes and the poetry of fractions, of how to teach patience without using the word, of showing people that control isn't force but steadiness. He wanted to start with a simple project, a step stool, useful, humble, honest. "Everyone thinks they need to make a table first," he said. "But if you learn to build one good step, you can reach almost anything." When he finished, I took a slow breath. "You know," I said, "when I was 42, I went back to school for a semester just to prove to myself that being a mother and a wife and a bookkeeper wasn't all I was allowed to be. I took a class on watercolor and one on local history. Everyone thought it was silly. But the day I carried my little stack of sketchbooks home, I felt taller somehow, like I had stepped up onto something just high enough to see another horizon. No one gave me permission for that either. I did it because I was still alive." He looked at me like he was memorizing the shape of my words. "I didn't know that. There's a lot we don't know about the people we love," I said. "Not because they hide on purpose, but because they don't always think their quiet stories matter. They do. They always do." The wind eased, the house sighed, and a faint ash settled in the grate like the end of a sentence. We said good night without standing, both of us too comfortable in the warm circle we'd made. After he went upstairs, I stayed where I was, and let the night talk to me. I thought of all the ladders leaned against the wrong walls in this world, and all the brave souls climbing down to move them. I thought of my husband's hands and Ethan's hands in my own, older now, but still steady enough to hold a mug, a pencil, a younger hand in need of something solid. I closed my eyes and saw the garage lit by morning, dust floating in gold streams, the first line drawn on a piece of pine. I saw Ethan show someone how to square an edge, how to listen for the moment the tool stops fighting you, how to recognize the small click that tells you are true. A log shifted, a final glow breathed out, and the room dimmed to embers. I stood slowly, joints murmuring their familiar protests, and turned off the lamp. In the glass of the dark window, I saw our reflections faintly. My face, a map of years, his upstairs turning toward a future he had chosen. It isn't the size of the secret that changes a life, I thought, but the courage to say it, and the tenderness that receives it. I went to bed feeling the peace that comes when something long stuck finally moves. Not a dramatic leap, but a steady human step.